Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Joining in Justice, benefiting the Doors Legal Services Center. We're so grateful that you've been able to join us tonight. My name is Kelly Stevens, and I'm a proud member of the Doors Board of Directors. Over the last few months, I've had the privilege of serving on the search committee as we've worked to identify our next chief executive. Before we move into tonight's agenda, we wanted to share some exciting news we announced earlier today. We're thrilled to announce that Kelsey Louie will be joining the Door and Broome Street Academy as our new CEO starting on June 28th. I know he's in the audience tonight, so welcome, Kelsey. Kelsey's a public health leader with more than 20 years of experience supporting youth, families, and communities of color. He comes to us from GMHC, a New York City-based nonprofit focused on ending the AIDS epidemic and uplifting the lives of all it affects. We're confident that with his leadership, our organizations will continue to thrive. Thank you all again for being here and supporting this work. And now, on with tonight's program.
Hello and welcome. I'm Mark Debevoise, President of the Doors Board. Thank you for joining us tonight for our annual Legal Services Center event, Joining in Justice. As you know, it's been a challenging year for us all, especially for the Door and the young people we serve. We've had to navigate a situation that made in-person services, those so fundamental to our model, basically impossible. And now as things open up more, still remain extremely complex. In 2019, our growth was strong in terms of young people engaged, and we were on track to continue on that path in 2020 before the pandemic hit. Since then, we've been innovating every day to continue to serve our members and doing so effectively. For example, from April to December 2020, we've averaged 600 telehealth visits a month, and this is something we had never done even once before March of 2020. As we've been sharing with you throughout the process, thanks to our dedicated and innovative teams, we've been able to stay connected with young people and ensure that they continue to be able to access the support that is so important to them. This has been particularly true for the Legal Services Center, which didn't miss a beat last year. You'll hear more about the team's amazing performance tonight. In some ways, we are collectively rounding a corner. The new federal administration is a really good thing for the Door and the young people we serve. The American Rescue Plan signed into law last month will make a real difference in the lives of the disconnected youth that we serve, and the outlook for the funding of the Door is more positive than it would have been otherwise. The delivery of vaccines is also making it possible for us to continue to resume more in-person services. And the Door is working to ensure that the members of our community, including staff and young people, have access to vaccines to effective information about their safety and efficacy. The Door is strongly positioned to play a critical role as NYC transitions from crisis response to recovery. And our work is vital to a strong recovery because the crisis has hit the communities we serve disproportionately hard. Immigration status continues to be a key concern for young people in NYC. Enforcement actions are slowly changing under the new administration, but the system continues to create huge challenges for young immigrants. That's why more than ever, we need your support. Thank you again for joining us and supporting the Door, and especially our legal services work.
Hello, I'm Kavya Viswanathan, Managing Director of the Doors Legal Services Center, and I'm thrilled to welcome everyone to this year's Joining in Justice. I think it's probably safe to say that many of us are glad to have put 2020 behind us. It was an unprecedented year, and equally so for the Door and the Legal Services Center. The combination of the pandemic and political events made it a particularly challenging time for our staff and the young people we serve. But for all that I'm glad to be well into 2021, I'd like to focus on some of the good that came from 2020. Thanks to all of you and your support, not only was the Legal Services Center able to continue serving young people, we were actually able to grow and expand the scope of our services. In fact, in 2020, we helped over 1,500 clients, a nearly 40% increase from 2019. We counseled hundreds of young people on their eligibility for public benefits, as well as on issues of family law, housing, and taxes. In the midst of a pandemic that disproportionately impacted communities of color, we were able to distribute over $13,000 in direct cash assistance to the immigrant youth who were largely excluded from government safety nets. In the midst of last year's harsh immigration policies, we were able to hand out 141 green cards. We significantly expanded our Detained Minors project, where we provide legal services to up to 300 children at any time in federal detention facilities in New York. We also launched a policy and advocacy initiative, recognizing that we cannot fully protect our clients' individual rights without addressing broader systemic inequities. With the recent change in federal administration, we have hope and are advocating for long-term, meaningful immigration reform. But in the meantime, as thousands of children come to the border seeking refuge in the United States, we must remain vigilant in holding the government accountable and protecting their rights. It's all of you and your support that makes our work possible. We could not do it without our many pro bono partners. And so I'm delighted today to honor Sullivan and Cromwell. Sullivan and Cromwell has been a partner of the Door for several years, and they have helped us with a wide range of immigration matters. A few years ago, during the family separation crisis, they helped 4 children reunify with either a parent or another family member in the United States. More recently, they won asylum for a young man from Guinea who was imprisoned and tortured based on his political affiliation, and they represent several children from Central America fleeing abuse, domestic violence, and civil unrest. Through all these cases, Sullivan and Cromwell attorneys work tirelessly for their clients. Nothing is too challenging, nothing is ever deemed impossible. We are so proud and grateful to have them as a partner. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Jessica Klein, Special Counsel for Pro Bono, and Natalie Lumtai from Sullivan and Cromwell.
Thank you so much, Kavya. The Door is a fabulous organization, and Sullivan and Cromwell is so proud to partner with you in this work. When the family separation crisis was at its height, I reached out to the Door and asked if Sullivan and Cromwell could help. The Door entrusted us with the representation of 4 teenagers who had been placed in Office of Refugee Resettlement Housing in New York State. Each of those clients had their own journey, and their parent with whom they had arrived in the United States had been separated from them by thousands of miles, with the parents spread across Louisiana, Texas, and Arizona, each in remote detention facilities. Our clients didn't know from day to day whether their parent would be deported. They had to make sophisticated choices about whether to prioritize being reunited with their parent, even if that meant they too might be deported. This presented these older children with a terrible choice: risk deportation on the tarmac after being reunited with a parent, or face the very real possibility of remaining in the United States without a parent. All 4 of our clients ultimately opted to pursue being reunited with their parent. Through dogged interactions with the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of Refugee Resettlement, Sullivan and Cromwell lawyers secured reunion for 3 of the 4 clients. The 4th client's father was deported, and the client ended up living with a sponsor in the southeastern United States, a relative of the client's. It was a very charged environment in which to be representing immigrant youth. The Door mentored our lawyers and placed their trust not only in us, but in the clients and the ability of these teenagers to make sophisticated and thoughtful decisions. We have so benefited from the Door's mentorship and advice in this work and in the work we continued to do with the Door, representing immigrant youth in asylum and special immigrant juvenile status cases. We remain grateful for this partnership and humbled by the work you do. I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Natalie Luntai, who's going to talk about her experience representing one of our clients. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you to the Door for this incredible honor. It's honestly been really, really wonderful working with your organization. We have done several representations for the Door, but I just wanted to take a minute to give you an example to talk about my experience working for a client who had been separated from her father when she came to the Door, and then when we jumped on the case to assist the Door in representing her. So this is a client who was 16 years old at the time, and we met her in May 2018. This was, of course, at the height of the child separation crisis. And so there was an incredible amount of uncertainty at the time, and the mentorship of the Door was so critical. And so after a very scary number of days where our client had been given the opportunity to be reunited, but was fearful that she would be deported upon reunification. And of course, she had this strong desire to stay in the United States. In her home country, she shared with us that she was not able to afford books to go to school. So this young woman actually had stopped going to school around the age of 7 and started working and doing housework, and eventually leaving home and working actually at 13 full-time by herself, living away from her family. And her goal, as she shared with us, was to become educated. And she wanted so badly to go to school, but honestly never saved up enough money to be able to do that. So staying in the US from our perspective and our client's perspective was absolutely the best thing for her. And the Door guided us and helped us guide our client to give her the information she needed to make decisions about what she wanted to do about her status. And ultimately, we had heard that fathers and daughters were being reunited and actually released. So we made a decision very late at night with our client that she would seek reunification. And very fortunately, upon reunification, she was released, and so was her father, who had been detained separately from her. And we continued to represent our clients with the Door's guidance. And there we were able to put together a really strong application for her special immigrant juvenile status. And then I'm really happy to report that it's been a long road, but after we were able to submit that in 2020, in the spring of 2020, we eventually got positive findings. And so her SIDS findings were granted. That was 2 years until her SIDS findings, and it may be yet another several years before she's able to get citizenship. But it has been such a wonderful experience working as a lawyer on this file. I was able to stretch and to learn new skills, and I was only really able to do that through the partnership with the Door and the amazing mentorship that we received. So I really want to thank you. It's such an amazing organization, and the number of people that you're able to help is, phenomenal. So thank you so much for this honor. It's really, the honor is ours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Monica de la Torre. I am proud board member of both the Door and Broome Street Academy, our charter high school. I have been involved with these remarkable organizations for over 20 years, having started as the director of the Legal Services Center. I feel very lucky that I have been able to continue to support this important work, and to be involved as the legal program and the door have continued to grow to serve so many young people with compassion and strength. I add my thanks to you all for being here tonight to learn more about what we do and joining us as we continue to work alongside so many courageous young people. And thank you again, Sullivan and Cromwell, for your long and dedicated partnership. It is now my true pleasure to introduce an incredible panel of speakers who will discuss the human impact of our work with detained minors who face complex and often inhumane immigration system. As many of you know, in February, the door was featured in an article in the New Yorker. In the article, readers learn about a young woman from Honduras who was being detained in New York, where she became a client of the door. If not for the immediate efforts of her attorney, Hannah Flamm, who leads our Detained Minors project, Maria may well have been deported late at night to a country she had fled for her own safety. Sarah Stillman, who wrote this insightful article, has joined us tonight, and we are very grateful for her work. Sarah is a staff writer at the New Yorker, a MacArthur Fellow, and the director of the Global Migration Program at Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. Sarah, Maria, and Hannah, thank you for joining us and for sharing this story with us tonight.
So Hannah, I'd love to start with you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what things were like for you back in February of 2020 when Maria first became your client. And maybe you can also tell us a little bit about what the Detained Minors Project at the Door does.
Sure. So the door became a legal services provider for Office of Refugee Resettlement Children's Detention Centers in December of 2019, just a few months before we met Maria and before she became our client. And we are a 13-person team, 5 attorneys, 5 paralegals, 1 social worker, and 2 data administrative assistants. And among the 13 of us, we provide zealous advocacy to every child who is placed at one of about 350 beds in the greater New York area. And so, as you can imagine, it requires a lot of coordination and prioritization and triaging to ensure that we are protecting the rights of every child who is in custody in the New York area. And that typically is focused on their legal advocacy and immigration court, but it also entails protecting their reproductive rights, their rights as criminal defendants in certain instances, and preventing their suffering prolonged detention. And Maria became our client because she was transferred from the border to New York, despite not having family here, after she was subjected to the migrant protection protocols, one of many Trump administration assaults on asylum seekers' rights.
Great. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about what the migrant protection protocols was soon too, and hear from Maria on that. Maria, maybe we can turn to you. I'd love it if you could tell us about how you arrived in New York needing an immigration lawyer. How did that come to be for you?
Yo llegué, yo me vine de mi país y me entregué a inmigración. A los 5 días de estar ahí en inmigración nos regresaron a un campamento de México y estuvimos ahí por 5 días esperando a ver si, porque yo fui con mi hermana, para ver si ella pues llegaba al campamento. Luego a los 5 días de estar ahí nos dijeron que mi hermana estaba en una cárcel de Estados Unidos y que iba a esperar su respuesta para ver si podía ingresar o salir de la cárcel para estar acá en Estados Unidos. Pues en México tampoco es que sea un lugar, como le digo, seguro, y ya nos habían perseguido y pues teníamos miedo de estar ahí y mi mamá tenía miedo también por mí. Entonces decidimos yo entrar sola por el puente. Luego de ahí pues nos recibieron unos agentes oficiales de inmigración que estaban ahí en el puente. Por eso conocí a la abogada Hannah ese día y que me ayudó demasiado, por cierto.
And just so that people understand the conditions that you were in when you were waiting for this chance for your case to be heard, could you tell us about the situation in the Migrant Protection Protocols camp? Could you tell us about the camp where you were waiting?
Ok, la verdad, ahí en el campamento era bueno, cuando nosotros llegamos, nosotros no teníamos ni idea dónde íbamos a dormir, la verdad, eso no teníamos ninguna idea. Pero habían otras muchachas con las que estábamos ahí que nos habían venido a dejar y pues con ellas nos pusimos abajo de un árbol porque casi no había espacio para donde dormir y me recuerdo que mi mami iba a salir, pero sí, o sea, estaba viendo, pero tenía miedo también. Entonces una muchacha le dice que no salga porque a veces son los de la maña, o sea, los de la mara, que ellos están para secuestrar personas. Entonces luego de eso mi mamá le dio mucho miedo y la verdad también escuchábamos que se habían perdido niños y cosas así en el mismo campamento. Y la verdad era muy peligroso, los baños eran muy, la verdad, no era como para vivir y yo de verdad me da mucha lástima por las personas que estuvieron ahí porque sí se habían demasiados casos que de verdad era muy triste, pero gracias a Dios pues todo esto pues cambió poco a poco.
Yeah, so Hannah, I'd love to turn to you to talk about what happened once Maria got to New York. We know that she was staying at a shelter for unaccompanied kids. And then one night you got a call. Can you walk us through what happened?
Maria crossed the border as an unaccompanied child and was sent to New York during the 30-day window when she could have appealed the denial of her asylum case. And so when she became our client in February of 2020, we conducted a Know Your Rights training and a legal screening, as we do for everyone, without knowing that she had been in the migrant protection protocols, without knowing that she had had her asylum hearing and had been denied asylum, without knowing the date of that hearing. And so her removal order, deportation order, became final without her having access to counsel effectively. And so the door entered representation on Maria's behalf and moved to reopen those proceedings so that the government could not effectuate the removal order that had been issued wrongfully, legally speaking, in our opinion, in violation of Maria's rights. And so while the door was advocating for her migrant protection protocols case to be reopened, we were also advocating for her to be released to her sponsor, her family in Florida. And US law and practice is very clear. The Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is responsible for children's immigration, is not an immigration enforcement agency. It is not meant to detain children while their removal proceedings are ongoing. They have a mandatory obligation to release children in a safe and timely manner. And since Maria's family had completed the paperwork to receive her in March, we anticipated that she would be released to them soon. And as you said, February, March, April, May went by, and she was still in custody. And on Monday, May 11th, 2020, I was on a run about as far from home as I could have been at that point when I received a call from a source saying that ICE intended to put Maria on a flight at 3 a.m. that night to deport her. And I am embarrassed by how long I was in disbelief. I really did not believe her because it was so patently unlawful for the government to try to execute the removal order of a child who had motions pending before the court. but I ultimately got with the program, turned around on my run, and spoke to Maria by phone. I advised her that she had the right to wait for her lawyer to be present before speaking to law enforcement. I advised her what was happening and that I was willing to go up to her facility to be with her in this process. I was basically calling people at the red lights on my way home, calling everybody I could think of to try to stop this from happening. I had my boss on speakerphone while I was in the shower. That was how rushed things were. And then I went up to the ORR facility where Maria was. And at around 10:35, I got there. ICE had left the paperwork to effectuate her removal down to the baggage tags for her luggage. And I met with Maria until around, till precisely 11:47 p.m. when the door was able to secure a temporary restraining order from a federal judge in the emergency part in the Southern District of New York. And that temporary restraining order forbade ICE from executing the removal order that night. And then the next day, the door with our then co-counsel, Paul Weiss, filed a habeas corpus petition to prevent Maria's deportation.
Wow. So that night you really had to essentially move mountains to just ensure that Maria, who still had this pending, was not essentially instantly deported. It sounds like they were planning to send her back to Honduras, where she'd already experienced such violence that very same night, right? Like, what do you think would have happened if you and your team hadn't been there for
her? Yes, that's right. I mean, on May 7th, the immigration judge denied the door's motions protecting Maria, asking for her case to be reopened. On May 8th, the next day, the New York field office of ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations signed the warrant to deport Maria. And on Monday, May 11th, they attempted to carry out that warrant. And it wasn't until May 13th that the immigration judge's denial of Maria's case was served on the door or on ICE formally. And so among other reasons that Maria was almost deported was apparently the immigration court communicating with ICE in a private fashion, which is patently unlawful, to carry out this deportation without counsel to Maria even knowing about it. I don't think that the door was ever meant to know that Maria was going to be deported until she was in Honduras.
Right, so you had no idea this was happening. It was essentially because you got tipped off that you were able to rush up there and spring into action?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really scary. Maria, maybe we can turn to you and hear about your memories from that night. That was a really intense night. That was a really intense night for all of you, and I'd be curious to hear about what you remember of the night that ICE came to the government contracted shelter where you were staying.
Pues el 11 de mayo, pues hasta llegar como a las 8 de la noche, pues estaba todo normal. Hasta que recibí una llamada de la abogada, Ana creo que fue, que me dijeron que no tenía que firmar ningún papel si yo no quería. Y luego pues me llamó mi terapista y bueno, también me dijeron los abogados que no me podía montar a ningún carro sin mi autorización o si yo no quería. Pues en ese momento yo no había entendido muy bien lo que estaba pasando. Hasta la segunda llamada que me hicieron los abogados, que ya me explicaron un poco mejor que ellos querían deportarme y que había un oficial de inmigración. Entonces, yo la verdad estaba nerviosa. Antes de la llamada yo estaba sentada en una mesa, estaba pintando, haciendo un trabajo de arte que nos habían dejado la maestra de arte, que nos había dejado un trabajo que hiciéramos, y yo estaba coloreando una flor y estaba tranquila hasta luego de la llamada. La verdad sí me puse un poco nerviosa y hasta lloré porque no sabía cómo iba a pasar todo esto. Pero bueno, luego de las llamadas, yo me puse me puse a colorear y estuve ahí en la mesa para que se me bajaran un poco los nervios. Entonces, ese día me recuerdo que llegó la abogada Hannah, el oficial de inmigración estuvo ahí esperando, pero luego se fue. Y estuvimos con la abogada Hannah platicando y también la abogada Hannah estuvo pues haciendo algunas cosas con una jueza a ver si contestaban o algo. Y pues la abogada Hannah me dijo que si quería dormir porque la verdad ya era tarde, por mientras esperaban una respuesta. Y pues luego no sé qué más, porque yo me fui a dormir. Al día siguiente, pues ya me dieron, la noticia que, que el juez había contestado, ¿no? Y pues que nos iba a dar un chance de que mostraran nuestro caso y las injusticias de la deportación.
Yeah. That sounds like a really emotional night. I'm wondering how it made you feel about the country that you came to seeking protection. And I also wonder kind of how it felt to have Hannah by your side that night.
Lo que pasó esa noche, pues a mi parecer, me pareció injusto por todo lo que había pasado, porque yo dije y pensé, yo soy menor de edad y pues yo pensé que era un poco diferente la manera en que tratar. Y pues pensaba yo o pienso que si para un adulto es difícil la deportación, no me imagino para un menor, ha de ser súper más difícil porque ya que está, se podría decir, solo en el aspecto que no tiene un familiar o algo cerca de ellos, estando allá en Nueva York. Entonces, eso era un poco triste y injusto porque nunca pensé de que llegara un oficial y me dijera que yo iba deportado y que a las 3 de la madrugada, la verdad fue algo muy, muy terrible, pero gracias a Dios puso pues a los abogados.
Thank you. So Hannah, you've been on a long journey at this point with Maria, a lot of ups and downs, and I'm curious if you can tell us, where does her case stand now, and how does it relate to the broader picture you're seeing facing unaccompanied kids who came here in a similar situation?
When I was preparing for this event, and what I have prepared to say on numerous occasions to everyone who will listen to me, is that the only reason that Maria is not being deported on any given day in the last 9 months is the habeas petition, the federal case that was started that night that ICE tried to deport her last May. And that was true. That was the only thing preventing her removal until March 30th, which we just learned about today, which is when Maria won her asylum case. And she is now an asylee indefinitely with the right to remain in the United States. And I'll let Maria maybe speak to that more, but
yeah, we could ask Maria, how are you feeling today, hearing the news that you got asylum? This was just maybe in the last hour or two, right? It must be, that's a really big deal. How are you feeling about it?
La verdad es que hoy yo sentí, cuando me levanté, un día común. La verdad, ya varios días no hablaba con la abogada Noemi de acá, de Miami, Y hoy que me habló me pareció raro. Entonces yo hablé, yo pensé que me iba a hacer alguna pregunta o algo. Y cuando me dijo, está sentada, está, oh, y yo le dije que sí, pero yo no me esperaba nada y ella me dio la noticia de que había ganado el asilo y que y yo pues le agradecí por también el trabajo que ella había hecho y también ella me dio algunas palabras ahí y me dijo que gracias también a mí por el esfuerzo y por todas las llamadas y por todo el trabajo que habíamos hecho juntas y pues yo le agradecí bastante a ella y también gracias abogada Hanna porque también sé que han trabajado juntas. Y pues yo súper emocionada le llamé a mi mamá y a mis hermanas y pues estaba muy contenta. Y le avisé pues a mi tía de acá de Miami y estaba muy contenta, la verdad. Gracias a Dios y a ustedes y también a usted eh, por ¿cómo se dice? Por presentar mi caso al público. Muchas gracias. Sí.
Soy agradecida también. Well, maybe our last question can be, we'd love to hear about your goals for the future. I know you're very studious. Many times when we tried to talk, I know you were lining up to do your homework, and maybe you can tell us about what you're hoping for in this next year ahead or in these next many years for your life.
Pues mis metas son pues estudiar, la verdad, estudiar y aprender inglés, porque sé que es uno de los más importantes acá, aprender inglés, para pues en un futuro trabajar y ayudar a personas. Como yo había dicho, quiero ser abogada, y ayudar a inmigrantes así como yo. También estar con mi familia es una de mis metas, que ellas vengan y pues de una manera legal, sin nada de lo que pasé yo. Y verlos y estar con ellos es una de mis metas, estar con ellos y trabajar, estudiar.
Wonderful. Those are all really wonderful goals, and it's clear that you have the intelligence and the perseverance to obtain them. Well, it's been such a pleasure to join you both. It's been a joy to get to know you and to see how hard you work. I can testify to that, having gotten your lengthy emails at all hours of day and night. You do not stop. You fight every moment for your clients. And now I'm so happy that there's this celebration and that Maria is here, safe, and has asylum. So what a wonderful day to have this conversation together.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Muchas gracias a todos, de verdad, por estar aquí.
We are so honored to have you with us, and really huge congratulations to you for being our Joining in Justice honoree this year and all the wonderful work that you are doing and have continued to do throughout the course of your career. Just for those who don't know all of your achievements, you are currently the Jacob K. Javits Professor at NYU, the NYU Law Co-Faculty Director at the Center on Race, Inequality, and the Law, the Director of the Civil Rights Clinic, and the President of the Board at the ACLU. You're a nationally recognized expert in civil rights and racial justice. You teach and write in the areas of racial justice, civil rights, and community equity. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, and thank you for this really incredible honor. I'm so proud to get this award from the Door. I have admired the work of the Door for many years. In my research and advocacy, I think and write about exclusion a lot, the way that America defines some people and some communities as outsiders, and then uses that definition to exclude people from the respect and happiness and opportunities that they are due, that we're all due as human beings. And the door really stands against that exclusion. And while Americans and society constantly tells our young people that they are outside the bounds of opportunity, the door welcomes young people inside. You tell young people that they are valued, that they are loved. You give them the resources and the skills they need to thrive. And you fight to keep those who would keep our young people from their birthright at bay. And I think in reflecting on the work of the door, it's important that the door understands that the challenges young people face are really not discrete. It's not just the lack of housing. It's not just inadequate education. It's not just employment discrimination or the racism or xenophobia or the homophobia. It's not just one thing that keeps our children on the outside. It's all of those things together and really so much more. So just as the problems are not simple or isolated, the solutions can't be simple or isolated. And the door understands that the most effective way to challenge social justice problems is to attack all of the challenges our young people are facing all at once, and to do it with every tool at our disposal: advocacy, education, services, litigation, arts, health services, whatever it takes. That's what I teach my law students. We call it integrated advocacy. And the door is a case study for how to do it really, really well in the lives of children.
Thank you so much. So could you tell us a little bit about the critical role immigration law and other civil cases our legal services department handles play in terms of future battles for civil rights, civil liberties, and systemic inequality that you are leading at the ACLU?
Yeah, I feel like it's all in partnership. The ACLU has a motto that they repeat often that says, "We're fighting for an America where we, the people, means everyone." And the door is supporting those young people who are far too often not included in the we, those that society has failed to take steps to protect. The fundamental constitutional rights to due process and equal protection, those bedrock ideas that are found in the Bill of Rights, they don't only apply to American citizens, they apply to all of us. And at the ACLU, our Immigrants' Rights Project has been fighting for those principles for a quarter of a century. And the work of organizations like the door is really critical to that struggle, because as the ACLU works to set national and state policy through advocacy, policy making through litigation, those rights find their real expression in the experiences of individuals. And that's the work that the door is doing. Of course, immigrants are among the most vulnerable of Americans. My parents were immigrants from Jamaica, and I remember their struggle to be respected and to be treated fairly, to have access for themselves and for their family to the same opportunities that everyone else had access to. And that's part of the reason I decided as a teenager that I was going to be a civil rights lawyer, to fight for people like them and families like mine. And I know that one of the biggest barriers immigrants face to exercising their rights is trust. And organizations like the door are really critical. Because of the relationships you build, you can develop the trust that is critical to advocacy and providing the kind of support that they need.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your personal story. Every day, you're addressing these issues of race and justice that are so important to many of us. What are 2 or 3 things that you think everyone should try to do in their day-to-day lives that could make a difference?
And I think it's important to just start with that there is something that everyone can do in their everyday lives, including not standing by when something evil is happening or in the face of inequality or justice. Just stand up and to be a voice for change. And critically for the people joining this celebration, recognize that whatever privilege you have, you can use that privilege to be a voice for justice. I often think of the admonition of Professor John Powell, who says that we can all be a part of the circle of human concern. And it starts with voting and engaging in our political process, of course, and having your voice heard that way. But voting and engagement is just the beginning. You have to think about what work you can do. What about your community? What can you do in your community? Are you actively engaged in conversations about access to housing and criminal legal system reform and educational equity? Different folks might be engaged in different ways. If you don't like to march, can you call your elected official? Can you go to meetings? Can you donate? Can you help to organize and support others? And are you willing to see and also challenge inequality in your own life, even when you are positioned to benefit or gain from that inequality? I think it's as basic as waking up every day and saying, what can I do to be on the right side of justice? You don't have to work at the door or at the ACLU to challenge inequality every day. Whatever your community is, be the change in that community.
That's a wonderful piece of advice. So the young people at the door are our future. What do you see that leads you to believe that there are positive developments for young people who are immigrants and young people of color? What are some of the things you're seeing that make you hopeful?
I'm seeing so much that makes me hopeful. I believe that there are positive developments for young people because I believe in young people. Young people are always the ones on the front lines demanding justice. If we think about the heroes of the civil rights movement, the names we know and the names we don't know, so many of those marching and at lunch counters and participating in freedom rides were young people. And if we think about the marches last summer challenging police violence against Black people, and the ones we are seeing more recently challenging the increase in anti-Asian hate crimes, young folks are out front again. And ultimately, our children will have the future they deserve because they're demanding it. And no doubt, many of those young people are members of the door. And I know that you are helping to inspire them and give them the tools and support to act on those demands. And for that, all of us are very grateful.
Well, thank you so much. We are really so honored that you took the time out of your very busy schedule to be with us today. And the Door and our Legal Services Center are honored to recognize you and your work in this way. Thank you, Deborah Archer.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to receive this award, and again, appreciate everything that the Door does for our young folks in our community.
Thank you all for attending Joining in Justice tonight. And thank you again to our honorees, Deborah Archer and Sullivan and Cromwell. Your work inspires our own, and we are thrilled to have been able to celebrate your contributions. It's been a big year for the Legal Services Center. We had to navigate problems we never anticipated, but we've also been able to expand our strategic scope while providing legal services to many more young people than ever before. And the experience of Maria that you heard tonight illustrates the lengths our attorneys will go to advocate for their clients. But we've only been able to do any of these things because of your steadfast support. It's all of you who make it possible for us to partner with thousands of young people to seek and find justice. We're still accepting donations tonight. If you haven't yet, please do consider making a gift. When you give to the Doors Legal Services Center, you make it possible for us to go the extra mile to defend the human rights of youth who might otherwise slip through the cracks of the system. Thank you and good night.